Don't be fooled by this old hat. Underneath it, there's a sharp mind at work. Meet Bernard, a young shoe shiner with a clever plan. He picks a spot right outside the bank not just by chance. He knows the people who come here are rich, and their conversations hold valuable secrets. While he polishes shoes, Bernard listens carefully to every money tip and business deal. As soon as they leave, he jots down everything he's heard in his notebook. His goal? To learn enough to become a banker himself. It's 1939 in Texas, where black people face harsh discrimination. Bernard's father sadly tells him that his dream is impossible. But Bernard's eyes show he's not giving up. His determination is stronger than ever. Fast forward 15 years. Bernard, now grown up, moves to Los Angeles with his wife, Eunice, and their kids. The racial tension here isn't as severe, so Bernard sees a chance to make his move. They're living in a cramped, run-down room at a relative's place, but Bernard promises Eunice they'll find a better home soon. He starts working as a real estate agent, hunting for properties all over the city. Here's what he discovers. Black neighborhoods are overcrowded, while white areas have plenty of empty houses. The black community needs housing and has the money to pay. There's just no market for it. Bernard sees a huge opportunity. One day, he finds a neglected apartment owned by a white man. The front yard is overgrown and the place looks worn out. But Bernard spots something others don't. The apartment's perfect location next to a busy black neighborhood. He makes a deal with the owner.
You've only rented out half the place. How about selling it to me? I'll pay you $30,000 now and another $5,000 once I fill all the rooms.
I like the idea, my boy, but I am not sure how will this work.
The owner is intrigued but unsure. Bernard notices a calendar on the desk with the name of a local bank manager. An idea sparks in his mind. He leaves the apartment and heads straight to the bank. When he asks to meet the manager, the secretary, who's biased against black people, refuses to help. Bernard waits for hours until the manager finally steps out. He grabs the chance and says,
I know one of your VIP clients. My business will benefit him and I need a loan.
The manager doesn't even give him a chance and turns him down. That night, Bernard gets an unexpected call from the apartment owner.
Did you use my name to get a loan?
Bernard has no choice but to apologize. To his surprise, the owner isn't angry. Instead, he's impressed by Bernard's determination and agrees to guarantee the loan. Bernard finally secures his first bank loan and buys the property. Just as he's starting renovations, an elderly white woman spots him at her door.
What are you doing here?
She demands sharply. Bernard stays calm.
I'm renovating this building,
he replies. The woman glares at him.
People like you should be careful.
Bernard remains cool.
Don't worry, this is my building and I'll take good care of it.
The woman, stunned, storms off. Soon after, the police show up, called by the woman who's outraged at Bernard's presence. When they question him, Bernard calmly produces a copy of the real estate certificate. He'd anticipated trouble and came prepared. The police see the proof and leave in frustration. That night, Bernard returns to the building. The old lady confronts him again, insisting it's not the time for renovations. Bernard, unfazed, responds,
I'm not a worker. I'm the owner.
The old lady is speechless and, a few days later, moves out, unwilling to live alongside black people. Bernard quickly rents out her apartment to a black woman. As he predicted, the demand from black tenants is huge. The building fills up fast and Bernard makes the follow-up payment to the former owner. The old owner, now impressed, proposes a business partnership. Bernard chooses a property and they negotiate the deal, signing the contract. The former owner ensures that white clients won't know they're dealing with black partners. Bernard agrees, and their business flourishes. With the profits, Bernard moves his family from a cramped apartment to a lavish mansion. Life is good, and Bernard's strategy pays off. His secret? When faced with discrimination, he doesn't fight back, he changes the game. But life isn't always smooth. The former owner, now frail and elderly, passes away, leaving his share of the business to his wife. She's fiercely discriminatory and wants to buy Bernard's shares at a fraction of their worth. If he refuses, she threatens to sue. In an era where the courts favor whites, Bernard knows the odds are stacked against him. Determined not to be treated unfairly, he decides to fight back in court. He needs evidence of his partnership with the deceased owner. He considers asking the bank manager for help, but the manager, now siding with the widow, avoids him. Frustrated, Bernard stands in the bank, noticing the subtle discrimination everywhere. It hits him. 4 banks in one building, all shut off to him because of his skin color. An idea sparks in his mind. Bernard decides to buy the entire building. He tells Joe, another black real estate developer, about his plan. Joe is skeptical at first. Buying such a high-priced property seems crazy. But after some discussion, he sees Bernard's logic. Owning the building would mean the banks inside couldn't refuse him service, and he'd get insider info on real estate trends. Joe is impressed. Despite his wealth, he also faces racial barriers. If Bernard can break through, it'll be a major victory. They agree they need a white agent to handle the negotiations. Bernard already has someone in mind, Matt, who's been helping with renovations. Matt is honest and ambitious but inexperienced. Bernard and Joe train him thoroughly: golf, high-class manners, math, and real estate. Matt excels, quickly mastering golf and becoming a promising young entrepreneur. At a golf club, Matt meets the owner of the bank building, an introduction set up by Joe. The conversation goes well, and Matt is in a prime position to buy the building. However, he's nervous about the negotiation. No worries, Bernard preps Matt thoroughly. He tracks the number of lights on in the building after dark, calculates the vacancy rate, and figures out the building's value based on its annual revenue and costs. Bernard ensures Matt knows every number by heart. When Matt sits down with the owner, he's ready. No matter how much the owner bluffs, Matt counters with precise figures, leaving everyone amazed. The accountant next to the owner is stunned, realizing they're dealing with someone who's clearly on top of his game. In the end, Bernard scores the building, originally worth over $2.4 million, for just $1.56 million. From then on, Bernard is greeted warmly by every bank president he meets. The manager who once made things tough for him is now astonished. With the backing of the banking industry, Bernard and Joe's real estate business takes off, breaking down racial barriers in Los Angeles. Black families start moving into previously all-white neighborhoods. They even get a meeting with the vice president. Years later, in 1963, Bernard returns to Texas with his family to visit his father, Britton. After a heartfelt dinner, Britton tells Bernard he's proud of his achievements. The next day, Bernard and his son wander through town and end up at the bank where Bernard once shined shoes. They see a young boy doing the same job Bernard used to, but only for white people. The sight deeply touches Bernard and rekindles his sense of responsibility to his community. He's determined to improve housing for black families back home. The next day, Bernard tells Joe they need to buy the main land bank in Texas. Joe is skeptical, given the severe racism there, but Bernard presents strong reasons for the purchase. Eventually, Joe agrees to help. They bring Matt back as their frontman and meet with the bank's owners, Robert Florence Sr. and Jr., to discuss the deal. Despite some doubts from Florence Jr., Sr. agrees to sell the bank to Matt and his partners. With the bank in hand, Bernard gets to work helping African Americans secure loans. His goal? To give his community a fair shot at housing and business opportunities. Things go smoothly until Florence Jr. starts scrutinizing the loans approved by their bank. One day, Florence Jr. confronts Bernard, Joe, and Matt, brandishing a letter from the U.S. Treasury Department. The letter warns of an impending inspection of the bank's operations. The team brainstorms their next steps. Matt suggests buying another bank and transferring the problematic loans there. They consider the Bank of Marlin Moore. Bernard is uneasy about Matt running the new bank, but he agrees to let Eunice oversee Matt's work. In the end, Matt gets to run his bank just as he hoped. The next day, Matt meets with a lawyer and starts signing loan contracts as planned. Soon, he gets a call from Florence Jr., who reports clients wanting to withdraw their money from the mainland bank. To make matters worse, a federal bank examiner arrives at the Marlin Bank. Bernard, determined to stay close to the action, disguises himself as a janitor. Despite his efforts, the examiner uncovers major issues with several loans. Bernard can hardly believe the absurd loans were approved. It turns out Florence Jr. was behind it all, using his influence to sneak in the problematic loans by recommending a lawyer who cut corners. Bernard and Joe decide that the best course of action is to walk away from the Bank of Marlin. But Matt, unwilling to let go of his bank, makes a move without informing his partners. The next day, Joe learns of Matt's actions and rushes to the mainland bank with Bernard. They confront Matt while Florence Jr. looks on smugly. Bernard demands to see their records, but it's too late. Federal examiners arrive to revoke Mainland Bank's license, and as they leave, the FBI arrests Bernard and Joe. Despite Bernard's attempts to stand firm, it's a losing battle. Later, Bernard and Joe meet with their lawyer and discover their case has been tangled up with racial politics. Meanwhile, Matt negotiates with Senator McClellan, agreeing to testify against his partners in exchange for his freedom. That night, Matt makes a phone call, following McClellan's advice and testifying against Bernard and Joe at a Senate hearing the next day. Later, Bernard meets with McClellan, who offers him a choice: take an immunity deal and confirm Matt's testimony or face prison. Bernard decides to speak out about racial discrimination, sharing truths he's kept inside for years. Soon after, Bernard and Joe's fortunes are wiped out. They're sentenced to federal prison, and Florence Jr. buys the mainland bank for a fraction of what Bernard and Joe paid. Matt walks away without any charges. Years later, Bernard and Joe are released from prison. Eunice is puzzled by their happiness despite their lost fortune. The surprise comes when Joe reveals they have properties next to each other in the Bahamas. Eunice is shocked and asks Bernard how this happened. Bernard explains that the night before Matt's testimony, he called Bernard to share the senator's deal and apologize. In return, Bernard asked Matt to help protect their assets before the government could seize them. The movie ends with the revelation that Bernard and Joe's properties were key in the fight against housing segregation in LA, and they still enjoy their two mansions side by side in the Bahamas.